The city had never seen a wedding quite like it. Not because it was expensive. Lagos had hosted weddings that cost more than hospitals. Not because politicians came. Politicians attended everything. Not because celebrities filled the front rows. Celebrities loved cameras. No. People came because everyone wanted proof. Proof that miracles sometimes survived newspapers. Proof that a man once condemned to a wheelchair could walk beside the woman who had refused to leave him. Proof that a village girl once mocked by society could become Mrs. Era Okafor without lowering her eyes before anyone. By sunrise, Freedom Park was already alive. White flowers stretched from the entrance to the old colonial arches. Hundreds of candles floated upon shallow pools built especially for the ceremony. Children from the pediatric ward the Okafor Foundation had funded scattered rose petals across the stone walkway. Many of them carried scars. Burn scars. Operation scars. Skin graft scars. Era had insisted. If we celebrate, she had told the planners, then we celebrate with the children who taught us what surviving really means. Nobody argued. Not anymore. Inside the bridal room, Mama Raisai slowly adjusted Era's veil. Her left hand still trembled slightly from the stroke. Her speech remained slower than before, but every movement carried determination. You are moving. Era smiled. You sound surprised. I am. Mama laughed softly. I thought after all that fighting, you'd run away from this family. Era looked into the mirror. For a long time. I almost did. Silence. Then Mama nodded. I know. Neither woman cried. There had been enough tears to drown a generation. Instead, Mama carefully straightened the necklace resting against Era's collarbone. My grandmother wore this. She paused. My mother wore it. Another pause. I wanted Amara to wear it. Era gently covered Mama's hand. I know. Mama lowered her eyes. I spent years trying to make you invisible. You did. I cannot erase that. No. But, her voice broke. Thank you for refusing to disappear. Era embraced her. Not tightly. Just enough. Some wounds healed best without pressure. Outside, Leo was having an argument. It involved 6 security teams, 3 police commanders, a bomb squad, 2 sniffer dogs, 1 frustrated wedding planner, and Owen. We have swept this building 4 times. Leo folded his arms. We sweep it again. The guests are arriving. We sweep faster. The governor is waiting. The governor can continue waiting. The archbishop can also wait. Owen sighed. You have become impossible. Leo looked perfectly serious. I watched my chairman survive a bridge assassination, a warehouse explosion, 2 kidnappings, 3 board coups, 1 inheritance war, for poisoning attempts, and a family reunion. He pointed toward the entrance. Nobody enters until every flower pot is checked. The wedding planner rubbed his forehead. Even the flowers? Especially the flowers. They're lilies. They could also be bombs. Owen laughed. You need a holiday. I need boring employment. Across the park, journalists whispered among themselves. Did you hear? What? They invited Connor's former secretary. What? Apparently, she became a witness for the prosecution. No. They paid for her university degree. Seriously? They said everyone deserves another beginning. One reporter lowered her camera. They've changed. Another answered quietly. No. They've healed. The music began. The choir's first note drifted across Freedom Park like morning mist. Guests stood. Children smiled. Phones lifted. Then the crowd became silent. Era appeared. Not dressed like a queen. Not dressed like society expected. Her gown was remarkably simple, elegant, graceful, almost understated. The only extravagant thing she wore was confidence. Every step seemed lighter than the one before. Not because life had become easier, because she no longer carried everyone else's shame. At the altar stood Zane, walking, completely unaided. He wore no brace, no cane, no hidden support, only a smile that refused to behave like a chairman's. Leo leaned toward Owen. I told him not to grin. He ignored you? He always ignores me. Good. The priest smiled. We meet again. Laughter spread through the audience. When we stood together years ago, we witnessed two strangers promising forever. He looked between them. Today, we witnessed two survivors choosing forever again. The vows were different. No lawyer had written them. No etiquette consultant approved them. Era spoke first. When I first met you, I believed kindness belonged to fairy tales. You proved it could survive boardrooms. Laughter. You carried me through fires. You carried me through grief. You carried me through a family that wasn't ready for either of us. She smiled. So today I promise something much smaller. I promise ordinary. Gasps. I promise breakfast. I promise arguments over burnt toast. I promise complaining when you leave wet towels everywhere. More laughter. I promise that if life ever becomes peaceful, I will not search for another battle just because I became used to fighting. Her eyes glistened. I promise to learn happiness. Zayn looked at her for several seconds before speaking. You have stolen my speech. Everyone laughed. Then he became serious. When I met you, I believed strength meant standing alone. I thought survival was enough. He slowly shook his head. You taught me survival is only chapter 1. He reached for her hands. I cannot promise you a life without storms. We've already failed that promise. I cannot promise perfect health. The doctors have forbidden such optimism. More laughter. But I promise. If darkness ever returns, I will never again try to face it without telling you. He smiled. I promise fewer secrets. Leo coughed dramatically. The audience erupted. Very funny, Zayn said. I heard that. The rings were exchanged. The choir rose. The priest raised both hands. Before God. Before your families. Before those who watched you fall. And before those who watched you rise. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again, the applause seemed endless. The reception lasted until sunset. Children danced beside billionaires. Nurses danced beside ministers. Drivers danced beside executives. Nobody seemed to remember who had once belonged where. Perhaps that was the point. Late that evening, after every photograph, every speech, every toast, every dance, the two of them escaped. Only briefly. They slipped away onto a quiet terrace overlooking Lagos Lagoon. The city lights shimmered across the water. For the first time in years, nobody followed them. No guards. No board members. No police. No enemies. Just silence. Era leaned against the railing. It feels strange. What does? Being happy. Zayn nodded. I know. She laughed. I keep expecting somebody to drive a truck through the wall. So, do I. Silence again. Comfortable silence. The kind neither of them had known before. I used to dream, Era whispered, that if we ever defeated everyone, I'd suddenly feel complete. And I don't. He looked at her. I feel normal. She almost sounded disappointed. I wake up worrying whether the flowers need watering. I wonder if Mama remembered her medicine. I think about school fees for the foundation children. I even argued with the chef because he overcooked fish yesterday. She smiled. I think I became ordinary. Zayn gently squeezed her hand. My love. That was always the prize. The following Monday, construction officially began on the new pediatric burns unit. Television cameras arrived. Government officials arrived. Architects arrived. The children arrived wearing bright yellow safety helmets, much too large for their heads. One little girl tugged at Era's sleeve. Is this really ours? Era knelt. It belongs to every child who needs it. The girl nodded solemnly. Then I'll become a doctor. Wonderful. So I can work here. Era blinked away sudden tears. I'll save you a place. Life slowly settled. Board meetings resumed. Contracts were signed. Factories expanded. Mama Rice-I attended physiotherapy 3 mornings each week. She still scolded everyone. The therapists considered this excellent progress. Owen's son, Jr., insisted on visiting Chairman Zane every Friday after school. Leo continued refusing holidays. Everything felt steady until one rainy Thursday. A plain brown envelope appeared on Zane's desk. No return address. No courier records. No fingerprints. Inside lay only a single sheet of yellowed paper. Typed. Not handwritten. The message contained just 7 lines. Some victories bury older crimes. Connor was never the beginning. Your grandfather inherited more than land. Ask why one family photograph has 6 faces, when church records list 7. Do not trust the official history. Someone is still being erased. Nothing else. No signature. No demand. No threat. Only silence. Leo searched every camera surrounding headquarters. Nothing. The messenger had never appeared. The envelope simply existed. Impossible. That evening, Zane carried the letter home. Era read it twice, then folded it carefully. What do you think? I think, she answered slowly, we have earned one peaceful week. You don't want to investigate? I do. She placed the letter inside a drawer. But not tonight. She walked toward the balcony overlooking the garden. Listen. He listened. Crickets. Wind. Nothing more. No explosions. No sirens. No lawyers. No relatives. She smiled. Let's be selfish. Just tonight. He looked at the drawer. Then at her. Finally, he locked it. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. They sat beneath the stars, speaking about everything except conspiracies. For several precious hours, the world allowed them peace. Neither noticed the dark sedan parked beyond the far gate. Its headlights remained off. Inside sat a man holding binoculars. He watched the house without moving. After nearly an hour, he spoke quietly into a satellite phone. The letter has been delivered. A woman's calm voice answered from the other end. Good. Did they open it? Yes. And they chose not to follow it. A pause. Then soft laughter. They're finally learning to live. Another pause. Which means they're finally vulnerable. The line went dead. The sedan pulled away without a sound. Far behind it, the lights of the Okafor estate glowed warmly against the Lagos night, unaware that the past had not finished with them yet. Peace had a rhythm. It arrived quietly, without applause, and settled into the corners of the Okafor estate like morning sunlight filtering through mango trees. For the first time since the bridge attack, the household no longer woke to emergency phone calls. There were no police commissioners waiting in the drawing room, no lawyers demanding signatures before breakfast, no frantic board members whispering about scandals that could sink share prices. Instead, there were ordinary sounds: the kettle boiling, the gardener arguing with the cook about whose roses had attracted goats, Mama Rice-Eye scolding everyone for walking too quickly on freshly polished floors, and somewhere every morning, Era humming while she watered flowers she insisted on tending herself. It amazed the staff. The chairman's wife could have hired 20 gardeners. Instead, she knelt in the soil with rolled-up sleeves, smiling as though wealth had never interested her. One morning, Leo found her planting herbs beside the kitchen. He stopped. Madam. She looked up. Good morning, Leo. You are aware there are professionals for this? There are. They are paid. They are. So, why are you doing it? Era brushed dirt from her hands. Because Basil doesn't care who owns a company. Leo blinked. I have no response to that. She laughed. That's because you're thinking like security. I always think like security. I know. She stood, carrying a basket of fresh herbs. And that's why you're still employed. Across town, Okafor Holdings had settled into a new confidence. The newspapers no longer questioned whether the chairman could lead. They questioned how one company had recovered so quickly from so many disasters. Board meetings became almost boring, which to Zane felt like success. On one Tuesday morning, he entered the conference room carrying only a notebook. The directors stood instinctively. Please, he said, smiling. If everyone keeps standing every time I walk in, we'll never finish quarterly reports. Laughter circled the room. Even directors who had once feared him now relaxed. Fear had been replaced by respect. A subtle but important difference. The meeting lasted exactly 92 minutes. No shouting. No accusations. No attempted coups. As they left, Owen whispered to Leo, "I miss the old days." Leo stared. "You miss assassination attempts." They made meetings shorter. That evening, however, the anonymous letter returned to Zane's thoughts. He unlocked the drawer in his study. The yellowed paper remained exactly where he had placed it. "Someone is still being erased." He read the sentence again, then folded it carefully. He had promised Era one peaceful week. The week had ended yesterday. A knock came at the door. "Come in." Leo entered carrying a folder. "I took the liberty." Zane smiled. "I was wondering how long you'd wait. I lasted 6 days." "Impressive." Leo placed the folder on the desk. "I began quietly. You investigated." "I observed." "You investigated." "I investigated." Inside the folder were copies of parish registers dating back nearly 70 years, marriage certificates, birth records, burial records, and one handwritten note. Leo pointed toward it. "The church named in the letter still keeps handwritten archives." "You went yourself?" "I told them I was researching local history." "They believed you?" "I donated a new roof." Zane laughed. "Very effective." The parish records revealed something odd. The Okafor family appeared dozens of times. Births, baptisms, marriages, funerals. Yet one entry had been crossed out so heavily that the ink had torn through the page. Only a few words remained visible. Male child. Okafor. Baptized. August. Nothing else. Someone had deliberately destroyed the record. Not time. Not water. A hand. Human. Intentional. Leo quietly added, "The priest said nobody has touched those books in decades." That night, Era studied the copies beneath a reading lamp. Her finger traced the damaged page. This wasn't anger. No. No. She looked at Zane. This was fear. He nodded. The letter mentioned a seventh face. She reached for an old family album Mama Raisai had once given them. Dozens of photographs. Celebrations, Christmas dinners, naming ceremonies, business anniversaries. Finally, one faded black and white portrait. 7 chairs, 6 people, 1 empty space. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then Era noticed it. The chairs weren't evenly spaced. There was a gap, too wide, as though another chair had once stood there. Someone had cropped the picture, carefully, professionally, removing whoever had occupied that place. She slowly looked up. They didn't just erase records. They erased photographs. The next afternoon they visited Mama Raisai. She was sitting beneath the veranda shelling peas with astonishing determination. "You both have that face." "What face?" "The one that means trouble has found you." Era sat beside her. "It might have." Zane placed the old photograph on the table. Mama froze. Her hands stopped moving. One pea rolled across the floor unnoticed. She stared at the picture for a long time. Long enough that silence became its own answer. Finally, she whispered, "Where did you find this?" "Our attic." "I thought I'd burned every copy." Neither spoke. Mama closed her eyes. "So, the dead have become impatient." She asked the servants to leave. Even the guards. Only the 3 of them remained. Her voice was softer than either had ever heard. "When I married into this family, your grandfather was already feared. He built businesses. He built enemies. He also built secrets." She looked toward the garden. "There were 2 sons." "Everyone knows that," Zane said. "My father and Uncle Connor." Mama nodded slowly. "That is what everyone knows." Another silence. "There were 3. The words hung motionless. Era felt goosebumps. The eldest was named Emmanuel. Neither had ever heard the name. He was brilliant. He could repair engines before he learned algebra. He loved books. He hated power. Mama smiled sadly. "Your grandfather wanted a businessman. Emmanuel wanted to become a teacher." The family had argued constantly, until one rainy season, Emmanuel disappeared. Officially, everyone said he drowned crossing a flooded river. No body was recovered. No funeral was held. Only mourning. Years later, the family stopped mentioning him. Photographs disappeared. School certificates vanished. Church records changed. Eventually, even servants forgot. Why? Era asked quietly. Mama looked at the faded photograph. Because your grandfather insisted the family had only 2 sons. But why erase him? I never knew. She hesitated. Or perhaps I was too frightened to ask. That night, nobody slept well. The next morning, Leo arrived unusually early. He carried another envelope. This came from Enugu. Already. I made inquiries. He opened the file. There is a small church near Yumidike. They receive an anonymous donation every August. Every year. For 63 years. Era frowned. From whom? No name. Only initials. Yo. Zane's heartbeat quickened. Emmanuel Okafor. Leo nodded. The priest refuses to discuss it over the telephone. By afternoon, they were traveling east. Not in a convoy. Only one SUV. Leo driving. Era beside him. Zane reading old documents in the back seat. The highway slowly gave way to narrower roads. Villages replaced city towers. Palm trees replaced office buildings. Children waved as the vehicle passed. Era smiled at each one. You miss this. She looked out the window. I never stopped belonging here. Late evening found them entering a quiet mission compound. Whitewashed buildings. Old mango trees. A modest church whose bell tower leaned slightly to one side. An elderly priest was sweeping the front steps himself. He looked nearly 90. His hair had turned completely white. Yet his eyes remained remarkably sharp. He noticed the visitors immediately. Good evening. Good evening, Father. We're looking for information. Most people are. He smiled gently. What sort? Zane removed the folded photograph. The priest examined it. His smile disappeared. Then Zane unconsciously rested one hand upon the old coral ring that had belonged to generations of Okafors. The priest's eyes widened. He dropped the broom. For several seconds he simply stared. Then, almost in disbelief, he whispered, "The ring." He slowly looked from Zane to Era. I wondered if one of you would finally come. The evening wind stirred through the old churchyard. Somewhere beyond the mission, a bell rang once. Deep, slow, as though answering a question asked many decades before. The old priest did not speak again for several moments. The evening breeze carried the scent of rain across the mission grounds, rustling the mango leaves overhead. Father Matthias slowly bent, picked up the broom he had dropped, and leaned it against the church wall. Then he looked once more at the coral ring on Zane's finger. I buried the last man who wore that ring. His voice was steady, though age had softened it. I never imagined I would live long enough to see another. Zane exchanged a glance with Era. We received a letter. Father Matthias nodded as though he had expected that answer. I know. Leo's posture changed immediately. You know? The priest smiled faintly. No. I know someone would eventually send one. He led them into the mission. The church was small. Its white walls had yellowed with time, and wooden pews bore the polished shine of decades of prayer. No marble. No stained glass masterpieces. Only simplicity. At the altar, a single candle burned. Father Matthias gestured toward a row of wooden chairs. Please. Tea arrived a few minutes later, carried by 2 young sisters from the mission. After they quietly left, the priest folded his hands. You have come because of Emmanuel. Zane nodded. We've been told he drowned. He did not. No one spoke. The sentence settled heavily over the room. Father Matthias sighed. I have carried this story for most of my life. When I was a young seminarian, Emmanuel Okafor arrived here. He was 24. He was exhausted. He carried one small suitcase. And nothing else. Era frowned. No family. He had one. The priest looked toward the window. He simply no longer belonged to it. Leo quietly opened his notebook. Father Matthias noticed. "You may write. I have hidden enough." The priest began. "Your grandfather, Chief Benjamin Okafor, believed power was inherited. He measured every child by usefulness. The eldest son inherited responsibility. The second inherited loyalty. The third," he smiled sadly, "had no place. There were only 3 rules in that house. Never question the father. Never refuse the family business. Never choose your own future." Emmanuel broke all 3. He wanted to teach mathematics. He believed villages deserved schools as much as cities deserved banks. He traveled secretly during university holidays, teaching children beneath trees. Era smiled. "That sounds like someone I'd have liked." Father Matthias nodded. "He would have liked you too." When Emmanuel graduated, his father presented him with office keys, board membership, shares, a company car, the future of the family empire. Emmanuel refused. Not politely, not temporarily, completely. He returned every document, every key, every privilege. "I cannot build wealth," he told his father, "if it costs me becoming someone else." The old priest paused. Chief Benjamin called it betrayal. The argument lasted 3 days. Servants heard shouting, doors slamming, furniture breaking. Finally, Emmanuel walked away. Not thrown out. He left. By choice. He carried only books. Nothing more. The next morning, Chief Benjamin gathered the household. "My eldest son is dead." Those were his exact words. He drowned. No one will speak his name again. Era felt her throat tighten. So, he erased him. Father Matthias nodded. Every photograph, every certificate, every memory he could control. Zane looked down at his hands. "My father knew?" He was 14. Connor was 11. They obeyed. Children obey fathers, especially fathers like Benjamin Okafor. Leo spoke carefully. "Why didn't Emmanuel fight?" Father Matthias smiled. "Because he had already won." They looked at him. He left. The empire no longer owned him. The priest stood. "Come." He led them through a narrow hallway into a small archive room. Dust floated through beams of fading sunlight. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Bundles of handwritten registers rested beside old wooden boxes. In one corner stood an iron-bound chest. Father Matthias unlocked it with a brass key hanging from his neck. Inside lay dozens of carefully wrapped packages, each labeled by year. He selected one. 1964. Within it rested letters. Dozens of them, all tied together with faded blue ribbon. Emmanuel wrote, "Every Christmas, every Easter, every birthday." He addressed every letter to his family. Did they answer? Era asked. The priest slowly shook his head. Never. They were returned unopened. So, why keep writing? Father Matthias smiled gently. Hope rarely obeys reason. One envelope bore unfamiliar handwriting. Father Matthias handed it to Zane. The last letter. It arrived 1 week before Emmanuel died. The seal had never been broken. You should read it. Zane hesitated. It isn't addressed to me. No. It is now. He carefully unfolded the brittle paper. The handwriting was elegant, measured, confident. To whichever child of this family still remembers kindness. If this letter reaches you, then time has finally become stronger than pride. I left because hatred is contagious. I feared staying would teach me to hate like my father. I prayed every year that my brothers would one day understand. If they never did, perhaps their children will. Era quietly wiped away a tear. Zane continued reading. I have never desired the company. I have never desired revenge. I desired only peace. If peace ever finds an Okafor after me, guard it more carefully than wealth. The room became very still. The final paragraph read, Do not search for me. If you are reading this, I have already lived the life I chose. More nothing. Build something better. That will be enough. Signed simply, Emmanuel. No one spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Leo cleared his throat. He sounds... Father Matthias smiled. Free. The priest carefully returned the letter to its envelope. There is more. He reached into the chest again. This time, he removed a photograph. Unlike the cropped version in the Okafor album, this image was complete. 7 people stood together. Chief Benjamin, his wife, 3 sons, 2 daughters. Emmanuel stood at the center, smiling, one arm around his younger brother. Zane stared. My father. He looked happy. Father Matthias nodded. He adored Emmanuel. Era studied the picture. Then something caught her eye. This photograph. She leaned closer. There. She pointed toward the background. A woman stood partially hidden beneath a veranda, watching the family, not posing, simply watching. Who is she? Father Matthias adjusted his glasses. I don't know. There is no name written. Leo took out his phone and enlarged the image. The woman's face remained indistinct, yet one detail stood out clearly. Around her neck hung a pendant shaped like a small silver bird. Leo frowned. I've seen that symbol. Where? I don't remember. But recently. As darkness settled outside, Father Matthias prepared guest rooms for them within the mission. The building was quiet. Only cicadas disturbed the night. Era stood beneath the stars outside their room. Zane joined her. You've gone quiet. I'm thinking. About Emmanuel? About the letter. She turned toward him. Don't you find it strange? What? The anonymous letter. It wanted us to discover Emmanuel. Yes. But why now? Zane had no answer. Elsewhere in the mission compound, Leo walked alone toward the archive building. Something continued to bother him. The lock. When Father Matthias had opened the chest, Leo noticed fresh scratches around the keyhole. Not old scratches. Bright metal. Recent. Someone else had tried to force it open. Within weeks. Perhaps days. He examined the ground beneath the window. Footprints. Rain had blurred most of them, but one remained. A boot print. Far larger than Father Matthias's shoes. Leo slowly looked into the darkness beyond the trees. The mission suddenly felt less isolated. Someone had been here. Recently. Watching. Searching. Perhaps waiting. Back inside, Father Matthias extinguished the final candle in the chapel. Before retiring for the night, he paused before the altar. He whispered a quiet prayer. Lord, they have finally come. May they have greater wisdom than those who came before. The church bell sounded once, softly, across the sleeping village. And somewhere beyond the hills, unseen by anyone at the mission, the headlights of a solitary vehicle appeared on the narrow road leading toward the church. It did not hurry. It did not stop. It simply continued forward through the darkness. The headlights moved slowly through the darkness. Far beyond the mission walls, the vehicle followed the winding road that cut through the hills like a pale ribbon beneath the moonlight. No engine noise reached the church. No villagers noticed. No dogs barked. Only the lights remained visible, gliding steadily through the night. Then they disappeared behind a ridge. The darkness swallowed them once more. Inside the mission house, sleep came uneasily. Zane lay awake staring at the wooden ceiling above his bed. The old room smelled faintly of candle wax and cedar. Normally such silence would have felt peaceful. Tonight it felt heavy. His thoughts kept returning to Emmanuel's letter. The words echoed endlessly. If peace ever finds an Okafor after me, guard it more carefully than wealth. The sentence disturbed him, not because it was complicated, because it was simple, painfully simple. Every story he had heard growing up described Emmanuel as selfish, ungrateful, disloyal, a man who abandoned his family. Yet the letter spoke with kindness, not bitterness, not anger, kindness. How could both stories be true? He closed his eyes. Images from the photograph resurfaced. His grandfather, his grandmother, the children, Emmanuel smiling, and his father beside him, happy. The image felt impossible. Zane had never seen his father smile that way. Never. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. 3 gentle taps. He sat up. Come in. The door opened. Era stepped inside. Moonlight outlined her silhouette. You aren't sleeping either. Zane laughed quietly. Apparently not. She entered and closed the door behind her. For a moment neither spoke. Then Era sat in the chair beside the bed. Something is wrong. What do you mean? I don't know. She folded her arms. But ever since we arrived, I've felt it. The mission?
No.
The timing. Zane looked at her. What timing? She leaned forward. The anonymous letter. The photograph.
The chest.
Everything. Her voice lowered. It feels arranged. The words echoed Leo's earlier concerns. Zane frowned. By whom? I wish I knew. Silence filled the room. Outside, insects sang beneath the stars. Finally, Era stood. I'm going to look around.
Now.
That usually works better than waiting. Zane smiled despite himself. You're impossible. So I've been told. She opened the door, then paused. Bring your flashlight. Meanwhile, Leo stood near the archive building. He had returned after everyone retired. Something continued bothering him. The footprints, the scratches on the lock. Neither made sense. Father Matthias had said nobody visited the archives anymore. If that was true, who had attempted to break inside?
And why?
Moonlight illuminated the dirt path. Leo slowly circled the building. His flashlight remained off. Years working as an investigative journalist had taught him one valuable lesson. Light reveals you before it reveals anything else. So he moved carefully, watching, listening. The night felt unusually still. Then he noticed something. A faint glow. Not moonlight, not starlight. A light moving among the trees. His heartbeat quickened. Someone else was awake. The glow vanished. Leo froze. Several seconds passed. Nothing. Then,
crunch.
A footstep. Somewhere ahead. Leo crouched instantly. The sound came again. Closer this time. A branch snapping beneath someone's weight. Definitely human. Definitely nearby. Slowly he reached for his phone. The screen illuminated his face. He activated the camera. And waited. Another footstep. Then another. The unseen person was approaching the archives. Leo held his breath. A dark shape emerged between two trees.
Tall.
Broad-shouldered. Wearing a jacket. The figure stopped beside the archive wall. Studied the window. Then reached into a pocket. Metal glinted.
A tool.
Perhaps a lockpick. Perhaps something worse. Leo's pulse pounded. Whoever this person was, they were not here by accident. At the same moment, Era and Zane walked quietly through the mission grounds. Most windows were dark. The chapel stood silent beneath the moon. Everything appeared peaceful. Yet Era remained uneasy. They passed the garden, the water pump, several storage sheds. Nothing unusual. Then Zane stopped. Wait. What? Listen. They stood motionless. At first Era heard nothing. Then, voices. Very faint. Coming from somewhere beyond the archive building. Someone was talking.
No.
Whispering. Era exchanged a look with Zane. Without speaking, both moved toward the sound. Leo watched from behind a stone wall. The stranger removed a small flashlight. A narrow beam swept across the archive window. The figure examined the frame carefully, like someone searching for a weakness. Leo raised his phone.
He zoomed in.
The image remained blurry, but one thing became clear. The stranger was wearing gloves. That detail eliminated any remaining doubt. This was deliberate. The figure stepped closer, then suddenly froze. Leo felt every muscle tighten. Had he been spotted?
No.
The stranger wasn't looking toward him. The figure was staring toward the church, toward something else. Leo followed their gaze and saw movement. Two people approaching. Era and Zane. The stranger reacted instantly. 1 second they stood beside the window. The next they vanished into darkness.
Fast.
Far too fast for someone of that size. Leo blinked. The trees swallowed them completely.
Gone.
What are you doing out here? Era's voice startled him. Leo exhaled. You nearly gave me a heart attack. Zane looked around. We heard something. So did I. Leo pointed toward the trees. There was someone here. The seriousness in his voice erased any doubt. Era's expression changed immediately.
Who?
I couldn't see clearly, but they were checking the archive. Zane frowned. Checking it how? Trying to get inside. A cold silence followed. The three stood together listening to the forest. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. Yet the feeling remained. Someone had been there, watching them. Perhaps still watching. The next morning arrived with gray skies. Clouds covered the sun. The mission felt different.
Smaller somehow.
Less secure. At breakfast, Father Matthias listened carefully as Leo described the events of the night. The priest remained silent throughout. When Leo finished, Father Matthias sighed. I feared this. Everyone looked at him. You knew. The priest folded his hands. Not exactly, but 3 weeks ago, I found the archive door slightly open. Had someone entered? I couldn't tell. Nothing appeared missing. Era exchanged a glance with Leo. Why didn't you mention that? Because I wasn't certain. Father Matthias looked tired, older than before. I hoped it was my imagination. Leo shook his head. It wasn't. The priest stared into his tea. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Father Matthias rose. Come with me. The archive building seemed even older in daylight. Dust coated every shelf. Stacks of documents filled the room. The scent of aging paper hung heavily in the air. Father Matthias led them toward a rear section. Few windows existed there. The space felt almost forgotten. He stopped before a narrow cabinet, unlocked it, and withdrew a leather-bound ledger. This belonged to Father Gabriel. The priest before me. The book looked ancient, its pages yellowed with age. Father Matthias opened it carefully. Father Gabriel kept records of everything, especially unusual visitors. Leo immediately became interested. What kind of visitors? The priest turned several pages, then stopped. There. The entry was dated 32 years earlier. Father Matthias began reading. Young woman arrived from Lagos. Requested information regarding Emmanuel Okafor. Era's eyes widened. What? The priest nodded. Listen. He continued. Refused to provide surname. Carried silver bird pendant. The room became silent. Completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Era slowly looked up. The pendant. The woman in the photograph. Father Matthias nodded. It appears so. Leo stared at the page. When was the last recorded visit? The priest flipped ahead. Several pages. Then several more. Finally, he found another entry. His expression changed. What is it?
Zane asked.
Father Matthias looked unsettled. This shouldn't be here. Why? The priest handed him the ledger. The date at the top read, 9 days ago. Zane's heart skipped. Someone had written recently. The handwriting differed from Father Gabriel's and from Father Matthias's. The entry contained only one sentence. The woman with the silver bird has returned. No signature. No explanation. Nothing else. Era whispered. Returned. A chill swept through the room. 9 days ago. Someone had seen her. Someone alive. Someone recent. The mystery that had slept for decades suddenly felt very real. That afternoon, rain arrived. Heavy rain. The kind that transformed roads into rivers. Thunder rolled across distant hills. The mission remained indoors. Leo spent hours examining photographs. Era reviewed records. Zane reread Emmanuel's letter repeatedly. Yet, answers remained elusive. By evening, frustration had replaced excitement. Every clue created new questions. None created certainty. Then, shortly before sunset, a knock echoed through the chapel doors. Everyone looked up. Visitors were rare, especially during storms. Father Matthias opened the door. A woman stood outside, perhaps 60 years old. Rain dripped from her coat. Silver streaked her dark hair. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Leo noticed something hanging around her neck. A pendant. A small silver bird. The entire room froze. The woman studied each face carefully, calmly, patiently, as if she had expected to find them there. Father Matthias seemed unable to speak. Era slowly rose from her chair. The woman's eyes settled on Zane, then softened, very slightly. You have his eyes. The words landed like thunder. Zane stared. What? The woman stepped inside. Rainwater pooled beneath her boots. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in her expression. She looked older than the photograph, older than the mystery, yet somehow connected to both. Finally, she asked the question that changed everything. Which one of you found Emmanuel? No one answered immediately, because suddenly every possibility they had imagined seemed far too small. The woman removed her pendant, held it tightly in her hand, and whispered the words they never expected to hear. I knew him. The storm outside intensified. Thunder shook the windows. Inside the chapel, nobody moved. Nobody spoke, because after decades of silence, the first person connected to Emmanuel had finally arrived. And she carried answers. But whether those answers would bring peace or destroy what remained of the Okafor family, none